Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. I am Anna Marie, and I am joined by Paul and Claire Bradshaw. So, Claire, it would be great to know where in the world you are and a little bit about yourself before we dive in.
Hello, thank you. Good to meet you both today. I am today I'm in the UK, in Stockport, technically right on the edge of the Peak District.
Fantastic, that's lovely, Claire. Yes, and we share that joint region. I'm towards the south, and I know you're up there towards more in the high peaks, which is a beautiful, for anybody who knows it, lovely gritstone part of the world, and it's really fabulous. So Claire, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on, and we will always ask our guests this first question just to kind of really ground ourselves. And so the question is what is your earliest memory of being outdoors? And the second part is, why do you particularly like being outdoors?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one. I think it makes me realize how much I actually forget and how much I don't associate things with precise moments. I think what I recall is a sense of being outside, and I couldn't tell you when that was. And I was a child of the 70s. And anybody that was a child of the 70s will tell you about snow in the 1970s and lots of it. And I think one of my earliest memories is of being outside, just in the back garden, in what felt like mountains of snow, and the novelty of that. And this still stays with me now, actually, the quiet that you get, how the sounds changes in the snow and the light changes in the snow, and it's quite mesmerizing, actually, isn't it? And there's something about that feeling that I can remember from being very little. And also in the woods near us, going with my dad and collecting like sweet chestnuts and picking up fir cones to put on the Christmas tree, and things like that.
Good.
And part two, what do you enjoy about being outdoors?
Yeah, I think it's the space. I think we were talking about the high peak before, and I appreciate that globally, it's not like being in some other parts of the world, but the expanse of it, I love that. I love the space that's created, and the different spaces, actually, from the contrast of being in woods to being in that kind of big vista of being high up. And also, I think the connection, and I'll probably end up talking about connection because that's a big thing for me, but the connection that being outside brings, kind of with yourself, that grounding, that awareness, the presence, also your connection to your environment and your connection to the other people that you're with at the same time. It's just not, you just can't replicate that indoors, I don't think.
Interesting. Child of the 70s. Hashtag me too. Born during the winter of disconnect. Winter of discontent. Winter of discontent in the 1979. Not that I have any memory of that.
I'm sure you don't.
Feeling a little bit left out down south today, I have to say, but it's all good. I was born in the northeast, so yeah, I'm there in spirit and soul.
Exactly.
Up there with you. So taking it forward to the work that you do now within the outdoor coaching space and everything which has kind of gone in between, it would just be interesting to follow the golden thread to how did you get to where you are now, and within that particularly, what is it that has inspired you to take your coaching outdoors?
Yeah, okay. So a few threads, I think. Not least the fact that I was lucky enough to have been born and raised in a county with lots of green space, so that was really accessible, and that and very much part of my childhood. Got interested in literature, went and did my English degree in Lancaster. So lots of Lakeland poets and, you know, environmental connection in with that kind of space. Yeah, and I don't think that was a conscious choice at that time to go connect with that, but when I apply hindsight to it, I think that's what definitely was going on. Enjoying kind of sports associated with being outside as well, outdoor activities. And then after I'd graduated with an English degree, which turns out doesn't qualify you for very much at all, became a librarian. And that was connected to my curiosity. I think my curiosity about all things and wanting to really support other people. And people often ask, well, how do you go from being a librarian to being a facilitator and a trainer and a coach? And actually, there are quite a lot of similarities, I think. So, you know, people come into, started out in public libraries in a real community setting, and people would come in with questions. People would hold questions for themselves and they come and ask you for the answer. And then you'd ask them some questions to try to explore it with them. And often the question that they thought they needed an answer to wasn't the question actually, because you'd listened and because you'd maybe asked them things. And then you'd support them to find an answer which was right for them and enable them to be able to do that for themselves next time. And I think actually the parallels with coaching are pretty clear from that. So I started out in community libraries, that real sense of place in terms of working with communities. I worked in the voluntary sector again. It's about enabling, it's about sense of place and connecting to place in each other. Worked in the NHS, managing library services, and then worked into organisational learning, development, employee engagement, I think because of my background. Again, about enabling others. And that's where I trained to be a coach, when I realised that my leadership style was a bit coachy, and that I wanted to really be able to support other people. So yeah, that's kind of the career part of the journey. In the meantime, I met my husband while we were working at an outdoor pool as lifeguards. He's a fell runner and a mountain biker and, you know, all that kind of outdoorsy stuff. So we did lots of that together. Well, not so much the mountain biking for me, but certainly the being in the outdoors. So that's been, you know, part of my life all of my adult life, really. And so as a coach, recognised that, well, if there's something I need to think through, if there's something that's bothering me, that's, you know, kind of sat around in your tummy and you're not quite able to resolve it, I take it on a walk to a high up place. And by the time I come back, it's sorted in some form. And got curious about, okay, so if that works for me, what's going on? And then the librarian in me kicked in and I started to do some research around it. Realised actually there's very little written about coaching and outdoors, but quite a bit around therapy and outdoors, and some aspects of that, of course, carry over. So I thought, well, let's have a go. Let's see what happens with this, and took my coaching outdoors on that basis. What I'd read from therapy, what I'd read about biophilia and so on, and from my own experience. And just really noticed the difference it made to people. So, you know, some of the coaching, probably like lots of people who've been on your podcast, is with people in organisations who are paid to think. You know, they've got to their point in their career because of their cognitive abilities, and you'd meet them in the foyer of some building in their organisation, and then they'd step outside and you just notice, okay, so they're breathing differently, you know, their shoulders are relaxed a bit, they've loosened their tie, or you know, just you can really see them settling into themselves, and the language that they use changes, you know, kind of go from work speak, this whole kind of work vocabulary. So talking about themselves. So, you know, really being able to engage with people, with the whole person, you know, not just the bit that they want you to see, that's the work bit. And yeah, just so powerful. And the feedback was, you know, that they needed it. You know, there's a wellbeing aspect of it as well. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about, really.
Wow, that's fantastic, Claire. Thank you. That's such a lovely thread. In fairness, I feel like having listened to you thread that through, you can almost see that journey of where you are today. From I'm hearing words have been very important to you, English, librarian, people coming in to seek curiosity from books, but they almost become the coachee later on in your line of trajectory. And there's just a really lovely thread that you've just took us through there, and it all kind of really makes sense. And you know, it's really interesting for our listeners and watchers to see how, when we articulate and tell those stories about ourselves, how for everybody it's different, but they all arrive at this coach or coach trainer, coach supervision but in a beautiful way. And you've just pieced all that together really beautifully. That was amazing. And perhaps you could just share with the listeners now a little bit, I mean, what would be some of the biggest challenges on that journey to where you are today, and sort of just perhaps share what those challenges were and how you've best, you know, found to overcome them. And it's always good for our listeners to hear, because we're all faced with those challenges on that journey, and people love to hear that.
Yeah, I wonder if for the last 2 years people have automatically said COVID was a bit of a challenge around all of that. Yeah, and it was, wasn't it? We weren't allowed to meet people, you know, and so what I was, you know, I was meeting people, and that just wasn't on the agenda anymore, and that really shifted things. And for you know, a short while, I just thought, okay, well, that's that then, really. But it was a short while, and I've got some very good friends who kind of coached me through, okay, so what does this need to look like, feel like, be like? And actually the need for people to be outside was even greater, I think. And I think, you know, we really started to appreciate what the outdoors gave to us, not just, you know, something to look at, but something to be part of, you know, our connection to it, with it, as part of it. So what I decided to do was run. So by this time I'd run a couple of coaching outdoors, I think retreats, but you know, over a couple of days, experiential, working with coaches to share what I'd learned and what I'd picked up from the literature and so on outside, and decided to see if we couldn't do that online. So we ran it in kind of small chunks online with bits in between. And a good friend of mine is a videographer and an artist, and at the point where you were allowed to be in people's gardens and stuff, we did a little bit of clean space filming and pieced this program together, coaching outdoors from home. And I have to share with you the absolute highlight of that was that suddenly people that couldn't be in the Peak District or, you know, in this part of the world could join us. So there was a moment where there was some clean space coaching happening over WhatsApp between somebody up in Saddleworth, on the moors in Saddleworth in Oldham Way, and somebody in New Zealand. And they managed to like get the timescales to work out, and this coaching was happening across the globe outdoors. Actually, yeah, it was a barrier, absolutely, and it brought some joy that I would never probably have envisaged without it, which was great. I think getting organisations on board with coaching outside as well, and you know, being able to share what the benefits of that are, is a lot easier now than it was, and I think people appreciate that and are happy to recognise. You know, you're not going on a jolly if you're having a coaching session outside in the park, or you know, that's not a jolly. Actually, there's work happening. It doesn't have to be sat at a desk at a computer for it to be magic. yeah, I think that's, we've said enough on that.
Yeah, challenge, opportunity, mindset, how we frame it. And yeah, for all of us as coaches, outdoor coaches, human beings on this planet, there are challenges that we face on a daily basis, and how we are in relationship with them and how we move through them is a testament to how we are. And just building on, there's a couple of words that have cropped up, connector, enabler, both seem very dear to you. And what I found was really indicative of this was an event that you facilitated earlier in the summer. It was the inaugural Outdoor Coaching Collective summer event. And unfortunately, my diary meant I could not be there, though it would be amazing just to have a bit of an insight to it. If you could maybe do a bit of time travel, take us there. What would we have done? What would the experience be like? And ultimately, what was it that motivated you to bring this to life?
Oh, well, it's the thought of going back to it is, thank you for that invitation, because it was such an amazing time. And next time, Anna-Marie, you'll have to come and join us. So it was in Rosendale, in the Rosendale Valley in Lancashire, a fabulous spot just there. It was over a couple of days. The place had got all kinds of quirky accommodations, so I took my camper van and parked there. And actually, there were a few other women traveling. There's a woman with a caravan, two other women with camper vans, and then they'd got pods and other places you could stay as well. So there was something about, actually, we really did quite immerse ourselves in being outside for a couple of days. And I think I go back to that, you mentioned it before, that word connection. And I think, being outside really connects people with themselves, with their environment, and with each other. And it felt, and that was my intention, was to really bring our attention to how that was working. And by the end, people really did feel a connection with each other. I think there were some relationships formed and enhanced, certainly, from being in that space. And like all coaching events, the joy of them is that you get to try maybe some different things, or some things that but in a different setting, and you get to be coached, don't you? By coaches, which is clearly a gift. So we paddled in the stream, the brook that walked through, and we played with the Cower model, which comes from occupational therapy. The idea of the river as a metaphor, and how can we invite that into our coaching conversations. And so we did, and we stood in the water, we splashed in the water, we noticed how that all worked for us. We did some stuff with clean space, which I really love. I was lucky enough to go on Marion Way's training on that a couple of years ago. And it works on the phone outdoors, it works in person. People enjoyed that. I think that real spatial awareness that it brings. We walked, so there's a lovely icon in the landscape near to there called the singing ringing tree. So worth looking at, and the images of it are amazing. Up in the hills, sort of on the border between Lancashire and Yorkshire. We had a walk there. In the evening, it was really near to the solstice, so we had tons of light, which was amazing, and we're really fortunate with sunny weather as well. But we lit a campfire in the evening and sat around doing some reflections using Nancy Klein's model for that, sat around the fire. And we did some yoga the following morning with Helen Roscoe, who's amazing, and some stuff around coaching constellations, and really had to think about the kinds of questions that you might ask as a coach, an inquiry that people might explore outdoors, which feels appropriate and accessible outside, and in a different context indoors might just not land really. So those questions that invite us to know things in our bodies as well as, you know, in our heads. So yeah, and good food, good company, lots of connection, great surroundings. Yeah, thank you for for letting me go back there. It was lovely.
Sounds fantastic, Claire. That's amazing. And how often do you run these? Just you know, do they so many through the year, or?
So I ran that one this year in the summer months, and I ran a couple before COVID, and then the coaching from home through COVID. And I'm just kind of wondering what might happen with that kind of into next year. So yeah, any thoughts gratefully received about it. Yeah, so how can, yeah, what's the next stage for that? I don't know yet.
Sounds very exciting to explore, and it sounds like very organic and evolving, so that's lovely. Yeah, but there we go, listeners, maybe can help Claire with making some thought processes around that. Yeah, fantastic. And one thing that really comes out of that, Claire, is the different environments and that outdoor connectivity, and we're really interested and intrigued to get you into the inspiration that came for your coaching cards, and just how that inspiration came about. And then sort of second part of that is, how do you integrate these into your coaching conversations? So how about the inspiration first?
Okay, thank you. So the inspiration again came from being confined to work on a screen for quite a long time. And the question about how can we invite the outdoors into these interactions, and there are a number of ways to do that. People walking and talking on the phone, and the coaching cards. And we talked about the Peak District already, so a lot of the images on the cards you'll recognise as being iconic parts of the Peak District. So there's Nine Ladies Stone Circle, there's the Stepping Stones in Dovedale, there's Frogger Edge, there's some detail, there's different seasons represented in there. And the idea is that on one side is a beautiful image taken by my yoga teacher and friend, and who's also an amazing photographer, Helen Roscoe. And on the other side is a question that I think it just resonates when you're outside and when you've got that connection to nature. So there are a number of things when coaching outdoors. I've kind of developed a few. I suppose it's a model, really. I suppose so. Thinking about connection. So, what are the questions as coaches that we might share with our coachees that invite them to think about connection, self-connection? And of course, metaphor is huge when working outside. They're everywhere, aren't they? We have an abundance of them when outside. So the questions that bring people's awareness to how metaphor can help us formulate what we know. Something about attention, the attentional effect of being outdoors. So what are we paying attention to, and some questions around that. Something around space, our awareness of space and perspective, those kinds of questions. And also movement. So that's such a joy, isn't it, from being outside, how we have a sense of movement. So the questions kind of reflect that model, and are on the other side, and they're kind of very tenuously connected to the image. So people can, notice what they're drawn to in terms of the image, talk around what that means for them. And then if they want to, they can turn it over and there's a question waiting for them. And it's amazing, isn't it, how it's just the right question, A fellow coach was using them, and she said, I just did this experiment and we tried out the coaching cards, and I've realised, you know, in coaching, does it really matter what question we ask? Because as long as it's, you know, well intended and helps people explore further the thing that they're interested in, it's great. So that was the inspiration. So at the moment, they're in a box, you know, and they're very tactile, and from a local printer and recycled and all that kind of thing. And just having conversations about getting them into an online format as well, so people can use them, you know, in their Zoom or Teams coaching. So that, I suppose that moves me into the next part of your question, really. How do you use them?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, online. So I use them online. So I've got those all set up to be able to move around. So I use them individually in coaching. So last week, you know, around, you know, that vision aspect. What do you want this to be like? If you were to connect, what do you want this to be like? Choose a picture that resonates for you. What is that telling you? Those kinds of things. For groups, you know, if I'm working with coaches, you know, that's self-awareness. Choose a card that says something about how you're showing up into this session today, and to talk around that. So groups, individuals online, but also kind of in a room. Sometimes I might invite people to gift a card to somebody else and explain, you know, what that's about. So I know some people have used them for, somebody was telling me actually last week, they have a strategy meeting in the business every month, and they always use them as the opening to the strategy meeting, in terms of either what you want to get out of it or how you're showing up as well. And journaling, you know, people can use them for that too. So lots of different.
So many different options, which in itself just is really, really invitational, and definitely encourage our listeners to check them out. And I think there's also this piece around a kind of nature connectedness, the whole inclusion and diversity piece. You know, not everybody can get outdoors or has access. So actually this is a way of having that relatedness and connectedness. I think it's interesting as well, the conversation that we just recently had with Sam Isaacson around artificial intelligence, virtual realities. Very much there's connections going on between our conversation today and that episode. So if you're listening in and haven't checked that episode out, it will be live by the time this episode is released. So definitely go back and check it out for the similarities. And another initiative, when I was doing some research into your background, that you've just got such a varied portfolio, which in itself is, I think, really inspirational and aspirational for individuals who work in the coaching world, facilitation, trainers. It's just being able to have lots of different kind of innovations out there. And Street Wisdom particularly caught my attention. It's something I've attended a couple of times in Bath and Frome down in Somerset, and that both towns found it a really, really just very supportive space, and also just very grounding. And it's really like what is in front of you that you just don't see normally. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I would love to hear your introduction to Street Wisdom, maybe just a little insight specifically as to what it is, how you became involved in the project as well.
Okay. Oh, I love it. You might have to shut me up, because I just love I love it. So I'm going to refer to the words here, because Street Wisdom describe themselves in such a brilliant way. Street Wisdom is an everyday creative practice that brings together the art of mindfulness, neuroscience, and imagination and well-being. So what's not to like about that? That's all amazing, isn't it? And like you said, you've been to Frome and to Bath, but that again, rooted in community, rooted in a sense of place and bringing people together. And sometimes they're online, sometimes they're, you know, in person. events, and so accessible. So once you've experienced a street wisdom event, it's something you can go off and do by yourself, you know, as a bit of a methodology really for helping you think through. So maybe it's something that you've been ruminating about for a little while and it's got stuck, or maybe it's a new question that you've not had time to even get to yet. You know, you can take that with you. So there's sort of three stages, if you like, to street wisdom. The tuning in, which is becoming mindful of your environment, and there are some specific invitations around how to do that. But one of the words that's really used by street wisdom is wandering, you know, and I love that. So wandering, tuning in, and then you go on a quest. So you take your question out into the space that you're newly attuned to. Like you say, quite often we're rushing around from A to B, whether that's in a car, whether that's, you know, walking quickly, and don't notice because we're in our own heads. And once we start to notice, once we're tuned in, then suddenly answers kind of appear. They jump out at you, or they might just quietly whisper over your shoulder, I'm here, take notice. So you have this new awareness, and often people will take answers from that. And then the third part is everybody getting together somewhere and sharing what happened, what they've learned, and what impact that learning might have in the future for them as well. So really, really simple stuff that you can do in towns and cities. It doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be in a green space or anything like that. And I went to my first one when I moved. So I moved house about 5 years ago, and I went to one in Stockport, the old part of Stockport, cobbledy streets and things. It was facilitated by somebody who I'd worked with back when I was doing community work in Manchester, which kind of felt really good to reconnect with them. So Gary Loftus ran this street wisdom event, and I knew, right, this just ticks all those boxes. It aligns with everything that matters to me, that I think is important. And like I say, the model is once you've been on one, you can do one. So I tried them out as in group activities, and then when I moved house, I thought, right, this is a good way to connect with my community, my new community. And then ran one just on Friday as part of the worldwide wonder.
Fantastic. That's really good, Claire. I mean, leading on from that, perhaps you could, how do our listeners find out more? Where do they go? Kind of the resources. Could you just expand? So if somebody's really, you've sparked that imagination, where would they go?
Yeah, so streetwisdom.org is the website, and David Pearl is kind of the person behind all of that. And you can find lots of resources on there. You can find lots of examples. It's a global method, if you like. So when I was running a session on Friday in Marple, there were sessions going on in Nairobi, in Singapore, in Amsterdam, in Sheffield. So, you know, it really is quite something to be part of. And so on the Street Wisdom website, you can find out where the nearest one is to you. If you want to go in person, or where you can join an online workshop. So a Street Wisdom session online.
Brilliant.
And if you do want to then facilitate your own, they're really good at connecting facilitators together and providing you with some notes and some support around how to do that. So it is really inclusive.
That's fantastic. Really good.
And within that facilitation role as a street wisdom facilitator, and this is clearly confidentiality fully respected, it would be just to get insight into, I know, the experience that the participants have, and maybe some changes that you notice, whether that's more general, whether that's more specific, just to get a real flavour of it.
So I think that maybe there's a bit of a zoom in, zoom out kind of way of looking at that. So I think one of the things that people take away is a renewed just respect for and awareness of their surroundings generally, you know, a general desire to want to pay attention more and therefore be present in their environment. You know, when people notice, I walk through here every day and I have never noticed the patterns on that thing over there before. So a general sense of how people connect with the space that they're in, I would say. That's kind of a zoomed out answer to the question. Zoomed in, I always remember the first story that I heard about this before I even went on a street wisdom by one of the people that actually came to my session on Friday, who's been to quite a lot of these. And they were talking about a piece of work that was within their team being cobbled together, a sense of it being cobbled together. And they were doing their street wisdom in a part of Greater Manchester that's got lots of cobbles on the ground. And she found herself walking on the cobbles as she was having these thoughts about, oh, I'm not happy with, and you know, it's not quite as I want it to be, and started to notice the beauty in the cobbles beneath her feet, you know, their longevity, how they all fit together really neatly, what it felt like to walk on them, how it was different to other kinds of walking, lots of it, and that metaphor that she experienced under her feet, you know, in that moment really changed her thinking about that, you know, that piece of paper, that document that she was in, the way that she was going to have that conversation with the member of their team, the way that it all kind of fit together. So really personal, I think. Lots of people said that they went away on Friday with lots to think about, which I always think is quite a good thing. Lots of new connections between each other. So people that didn't know each other before would come together. By the end, people were having lunch or, you know, sharing a lift. So yeah, definitely that's a takeaway as well, connection, community, and then that individual kind of response to what your environment offers you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That's great. And you know, I'm sure many of our listeners, having listened to your talking about it, will want to get very much involved. That connection. It's lovely when we bring people together, and you know, they are able to get that, as you say, full of thoughts and ideas and coming away. So certainly everybody can check that out. That's fantastic, and thank you for sharing. And really bringing it right back to you now is, how can our listeners find out, you know, more about your work? How do they get in touch with you as we're coming towards the end? How do they kind of find out about your cards and all the wonderful stuff that you're doing?
Okay. So my website is probably the first port of call. So that's I'm sure it'll be written down somewhere, but clairebradshaw.co.uk is my website, and on there you can find out different ways of working with me, whether that's coming on a coaching program, whether that's one-to-one coaching, whether that's coaching supervision, cards. There's a few audio resources on there as well that people can access. LinkedIn is another place that I'm pretty present in, so yeah, that's always a good place to connect. And I'm kind of on other social media stuff, but probably not so much. So website, contact me directly. I really like having conversations with people and yeah, connecting in that way.
There you go, listeners, how to get in touch with Claire. And before we let you go, just, are there any other resources that you'd like to signpost for our listeners? Maybe something that you found particularly helpful in your journey, or just a book that you might have read lately? People are always keen to know where to channel their thirst for learning.
Oh, well, let's have two. So the book that I'm reading currently is so you'll also see, I run have since January facilitate a coaching collective, the Consciously Connected Coaching Collective. And as part of that, we have you'll probably be unsurprised to know, we have a quarterly book club. And the book for December is Creating the Reflective Habit by Michelle Lucas. And I'm probably only about 1/6 of the way in, but I'm loving it. It's really accessible. And I kind of, it's really thought-provoking, both as a supervisor, but also as a coach and somebody that does reflective practice myself. And then the other sneaky one would be Wintering by Catherine May, which I read last year and I've told loads of people about, just in terms of, as we approach the autumn and the winter, and connecting with nature, making sure we don't push ourselves quite in the same way as we might do in the spring and the summer. So hunkering down a little bit.
I will definitely take that one. I think I was maybe a swift or a swallow in a former life, and every time it gets to this part of the year, I kind of look longingly and generally schedule a little sunshine break at February at some point just to get that hit. Though again, it comes back to this mindset and how can we really embrace the winter months, because we need them as part of our natural cycle, however much I try to resist them, definitely.
And she's all about that, Catherine May, all about, this is the natural cycle of things. It's great. It changed things for me and lots of other people, I think.
Claire, thank you so much. It has been an absolute treat to join you in your home garden office in the north of England. So much to take away. And listeners, watchers, what really resonated with you? Have you been on a street wisdom event before? What about coaching cards? Do you use them or not yet? And what about getting together as well? And how could you be more of a connector or enabler within your community? Loads to take away, and we'll be watching with interest what you have in the pipeline for 2024 and beyond. So another episode comes to a close. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. We would love to hear your thoughts and any future guests that you would like to see featured as well. We are on a mission to really showcase the work of outdoor coach practitioners in a variety of ways from all around the world. So if that is you or you know somebody, please do get in touch. Clearly, we are now starting to bring series 6 to an end. So we have got over 2.5 years worth of episodes for you to travel back in time and dip into. So if this is your first time listening, do check the other ones out. And if you are a regular listener, thank you so much for your engagement and your commitment to our passion project. So it's a wrap for today, and enjoy what you have got in store.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.